Yeah, that is exactly right. It was a full moon and the bags were on sale. We're back with another Off the Record on the Rocks with my good friend, Mr. Ankarino Lara. It is flying into February, so we're through the first month of 2026. There is a lot to get to. The big one breaking through for me was Musk's SpaceX acquiring XAI for a $1.25 trillion. We've got China banning handles on Teslas as a sneaky way to block Elon. Meanwhile, Elon is buying Elon with this acquisition of XAI by SpaceX. Disney naming its new CEO, doubling down on real-world experiences. And all of a sudden, Coinbase and the crypto markets, everybody feeling a little frozen here in Washington, D.C. Iced out a little bit. Ooh, that's an interesting one. And Bad Bunny politicizing the Grammys. Next weekend's the Super Bowl. Let's do it. Let's get into it. I mean, it's crazy though. There's the setup after Martin Luther King Day. We talk about it every year. It's a flurry of activity. You cannot keep up with it. It is impossible to keep track of all the storylines just down every path, every major industry on all fronts. And then this giant ice storm here on the East Coast just brought everything kind of to a standstill, including the markets, which are also frozen out. What's your hot take flying into February?
Yeah, flying into February. I mean, I know some of the country was coming out of damp January. I know that was a term that's at least being thrown around on the West Coast. If that's true, then I think we might be in moist February or whatever that next like sort of lead in is. I mean, the litany of stuff you just said is great because I think to our listeners, it's going to sound unrelated on the surface. But every one of these stories is at least tied to two or three, or if not all of the stories combined. And like that full moon that opened up this February, it was a February 1st full moon, which is very unusual to have it be on the first day of a month. It's called the cold moon. You look, Punxsutawney Phil has come out of his hole. You know, you got a Bad Bunny coming out of a hole, and Punxsutawney Phil, a good groundhog going down in a hole. And I made some money on the Polymarkets. It's like, yeah, is he going to see his shadow? I'm like, well, as far as I could tell, everyone I know is buried on the East Coast in snow, so it better be a long winter. How could you ever explain it ending suddenly? You know what I mean? So I feel like that was just a slam dunk across the markets. There was a lot of talk about how that they were going to rig it and just make him see his shadow until he like just basically keep him out there until he got scared, and then be like, oh, look, he saw his shadow. But yeah, I mean, to have that first full moon, to have it be the cold winter moon, it's called the Raccoon moon. You want to throw a bunny in there with the groundhog and the raccoon. And I just sort of imagine like a little trash bear rummaging around trying to find some cryptos. And for the first time, and I think as long as I can remember since we've even been doing this show, that the full moon coincided with a low price, not a surge price. So yeah, I mean, financial advice, but when the winter is going to go for another 6 weeks, it kind of sort of feels like this is another accumulation period for all things crypto. And clearly, based on some of the stories we just talked about, there is not one of the usual suspects in the news who is shy right now about talking about all the bags that they're buying. So this is a moment of accumulation. This was a discount that everyone wanted, and you know, enough swirl that maybe we can't see it as such. The retail investor is nervous and scared. Articles about people selling their ETH because they're terrified. It's all great fodder to just get good discounts. So I grabbed some bags. I know you did. It was an interesting full moon though, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like everything coming out of Davos, this pause from Brian Armstrong around the market structure bill. I saw some excellent reporting from Eleanor Terrett, who I love, fellow JMU alumni, covering that the only meeting taking place yesterday at the White House was with all of the ABA players. With the retail banks having a 2-hour-long discussion with the administration around these rewards for crypto projects, these yield products, essentially, that were included as part of the market structure bill that would allow for anyone to issue dividends or rewards as part of their tokenomics. And the retail banks crying foul. That conversation now taking place yesterday. And at least the vibe that I've seen, I don't think there was much more information coming out of that meeting other than they're going to meet again. And it sounds like they're going to come to some resolution, which has always been the thought that we're so close if this is the only issue, uh, as long as you can issue yield in stable coins and in crypto, I think everybody's going to be happy. Everybody's going to win. And maybe that's where, Jamie Dimon coming out saying these fintech companies are coming for my business. Like, he's not talking about fintech in the traditional sense, not Stripe
or Mint or something
Mint,
like
exactly.
that.
Yeah, he's talking about the Coinbases and the Kalshis, and lumping them all into this category of fintech coming for his business. Damn right, they know when these institutions are buying up Vanguard, buying, tranches of Bitcoin. It's Michael Saylor continuing to hint, yeah, it's on sale, buying, this massive accumulation stage while the market structure gets figured out. The government shutdown didn't even really break through the news, was a non-event. We didn't have time for that.
Right.
There isn't time for a shutdown. We've got so much to get to.
There's not even time for any normal or traditional national security issues. I mean, is Maduro just put away and the Venezuelan government is hand in hand with us as we walk forward in lockstep? Is Hegsreth hitting any more boats? Iran is trying to fly drones across our bow. And these are stories that barely break the surface in the shadow of what you're describing, this financial shadow.
Well, that, and yes, as the Maduro Venezuela, as huge as that story should be on the global stage, Epstein re-enters the chat with a new list of names and a new
just in time.
Just in time.
And we found 3 million more emails, guys. Let's just go through them. Do you have a month? Let's use ChatGPT. No. We're going to look at them with our own eyes.
Well, I mean, I think that there is something there, this intersection of AI with the news cycle, the pace that we're describing. When the DOJ releases 3 million new emails, typically that would take a few weeks or months to go through, but finding those needles in a haystack becomes a lot easier when you have artificial intelligence and computer vision models that can go through this stuff and surface the big headlines, essentially. Yeah, that's a real crazy one to me, that sort of as a distraction. And as you pointed out here, there is this heating up in the Middle East, this recycling, or at least it sounded like a recycling of a story to me about this was the UAE firm quietly took a stake in the Trump family's crypto company, and this being covered by the New York Times as though it's some breaking news that it's quietly took a stake. But isn't this what was happening over the last 12 months? Didn't everybody see? That is why he stood up World Liberty Financial. That's why we've been talking about crypto. That's why there's a market structure bill, and the American Banking Association is at the White House yesterday. Is because there is now a framework for a UAE firm to quietly take a stake in a Trump family crypto company, and for Trump to legally say, I don't know anything about it. I don't know who buys my stock. It's crypto. It's my crypto project. I don't know who buys it, because of that anonymity, that veil. And that's where the regulation comes in. Like, we need some solution so that this kind of market manipulation or bribery in the wide open isn't possible. Or if it is possible, people need to understand that is exactly what is happening.
And that's where the comments that we opened, really, we closed the show with last week, or last recording, and we're opening with now, is the concept of the truth layer. The truth layer is something we have discussed ad nauseum at times, because while in this case the story is true, quietly, $500 million, was it $500 million or 500 billion? What was it? $500 billion? What was the total amount?
For the final stake. It wasn't actually one of the bigger numbers, 500 million.
Okay, so $500 million. It's small, but if you're in the business of pushing envelopes and testing things like the truth layer, and what is the acceptance of the truth layer, because we've talked so much about that there are, in this case, different versions of the truth, because in this case, the UAE is quietly taking a stake in the Trump family's crypto company. Quietly, by being put in on one of the front pages of the New York Times. Okay, that's quiet. But this follows an ongoing pattern of Qatar donating a new plane to create Air Force One, of MBS out of Saudi Arabia, next door neighbor to the UAE, coming in and becoming partners with Kushner and trying to do aggressive takeovers of Warner Brothers. The cozying up of various Middle Eastern either families or countries has been something that really Kushner and company have been working on for 8 years. Since the first term, when Kushner was sent to, quote, fix the Middle East. What was it called? He was going to like manage the peace talks. He was the moderator, right? And everyone's wondering, well, what in the world does this guy know about anything to do with diplomacy in the Middle East? Well, the answer was nothing. And that was the point. Because the truth layer was he was there to just sow the seeds of future business deals. Hey, we're working on a framework. It's going to take time. We're going to find out a way to take your money in a way that's considered not only legal, but it will be like looked at as good in some framework, in some sort of lens. When you think about just the idea of that, rewinding to the first term, how completely unbelievably ridiculous that would sound. But now the truth layer is saying, well, no, so we're telling you the truth. 500 million just came in and it's veiled. The truth is there, 500 million UAE Trump crypto, but then the veiled layers of, well, I don't know what happens with my company. My son-in-law does this and this with the company. He's tasked with this and this, and you can just wipe your hands of it because one thing we know these guys don't like to do is send around a bunch of emails like good old dumb old Jeffrey. Millions and millions of emails just saying, yes, I want to do this illegal thing. So these are people who there's a truth layer, but there are other layers that are just not, they're obfuscated, right? The real motivation, the real interest. And I think that this also is heading towards a place too, where let's talk also about another shoe that has to drop and why things this year are being set up with what you're describing. When you were talking ABA and all these people in Washington right now and the banking and Diamond changing his stance on fintech, or at least bundling in the bad guys in that category and all this stuff. Let's not forget that another washed under the beautiful full moonlight of the snow raccoon moon was the new Fed chair has been nominated. This guy named Kevin Warsh. And why is that important? Well, he replaces Jerome Powell, and he does so at the end of April of this year. He replaces him in 2 months. Why is that interesting? Well, if you're already deep in crypto, and if you're Donald Trump and the administration and all his pals, if you're deep in crypto, and you now have international entities and people investing in those companies, and you're now deep in your own social network, what is this next frontier that you could have absolute control over? Because you don't really control Bitcoin. No one does. You don't control certain things. But predictive markets. And when you start thinking about getting all the clarity around all these new products, this guy, Kevin Warsh, is very bullish on Polymarket and Kalshi. And I think that they all see that as fertile ground where the United States administration and all their friends, can actually make the most money and have the most impact. Everything else is sort of pay to play. In this case, they're going to control it. Okay. Which is a whole new thing.
I think we got here on last episode too, but all of a sudden, if you control the financial markets, and if the financial markets are the new 24/7 always on trading markets, then you have to control 24/7 trading market in futures and predictions. And if you control the 24/7 futures market in predictions, then you control the truth.
You make the future. This is the point we cannot just gloss over, because when you then think about Elon Musk, I want to get back to this one, right? Elon Musk is going to use one of his companies to acquire another one of his companies, and he's setting the valuation of the company that's being acquired. Now, what if I also just set up a predictive bet, which is how much money will the transaction end up costing to the closest $1 million? And then all of my friends make that bet because I'm the one setting the price and I'm the one buying my own company. Then they all win the bets, because that was the future that they all predicted.
Let's stay on Kevin Warsh for a second. This is the article from James Hunt. This is Trump names crypto-friendly Kevin Warsh as pick for Fed chair. And this is really important. This first line, President Trump announced Kevin Warsh as his pick for Federal Reserve chair following a sharp surge in prediction market odds overnight. So which one caused which?
It's now that it's a two-headed, two-tailed dog. It's not, you can't tell if it's coming or going.
I mean, that is a hilarious line from a legitimate reporter and a news article. Basically, yeah, somebody knew, somebody close in the inner circle knew that it was going to be Kevin Warsh. Kevin Warsh himself should have taken out a bet on Polymarket the moment he knew he was going to be the new Fed chair.
Didn't he? Can we look at his OX transactions? I mean, honestly, it seems like this is, again, in plain sight.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I mean, we've talked about it before. I think Brian Armstrong did it on an earnings call when he just rattled off a bunch of words for those who are participating in the Polymarkets. I saw it on the Grammys the other night using the word potato or something silly that was out of place because, you know, if anybody had that bet, all of a sudden there's money, there's a market to be had, and those markets can be rigged. The future can be rigged if you are the one creating it. So I love that that's where we are coming out of a February cold raccoon moon, taking out the trash, prices dipping. People who don't see this, people who just see the markets tanking, are like, yep, see, told you, the world's falling apart again. We've got drone attacks, we've got wars, we've got Greenland, we've got Maduro, we've got Epstein. There's all this awful stuff happening in the world. Of course, everything is going in the dumpster for the raccoons.
Yeah.
But is it actually? You know, the market continues to show. And I think they were making an interest rate. I think Jerome Powell and the Fed got the final word today, right? I think there was a Fed meeting today. I got to even go check.
Yeah.
And is that the last one? Is that the last one that he gets to do it before the new guy comes in? And if you know what the future is going to be, if you know that this guy is crypto friendly, and this is the final one from Jerome Powell and the interest rates, and you need a catalyst, I don't know. It feels like maybe we got another 6 more weeks of winter before hope springs eternal.
I mean, that's what my point is that there's a lot of, you can't really get clarity when you still are adding pieces to the chessboard, right? Everyone talks about the 4D chess, and that sort of assumes that the board has been set and you understand the pieces that are on it. But a very important thing just changed. The Fed chair, Jerome Powell, as a pawn, has moved quietly across the board, just like the UAE quietly invests $500 million in Trump's crypto, and then lands on the other side of the board and becomes a queen. And the new queen is a guy named Warsh. And the first thing that comes out of his mouth is that Bitcoin is not a threat to the United States currency or the Federal Reserve. The second thing that comes out of his mouth is that we are going to use AI and it will be a de-inflationary tool. I mean, just stop, pause right there. When has there ever been anyone who's even remotely related to either the Federal Reserve, the Fed chair? You could pick the SEC, the CFTC, and even these guys who are, quote, pro-crypto are nothing like this dude. And when you talk about paving the road with the nice digital gold bars, and you can see it kind of wind all the way to the Emerald Towers of Oz, and you just need that one extra steward. You got a Cowardly Lion, you got a Dorothy, you got a Scarecrow. We just need a Tin Man. Walsh, march us through and let's just clear the way. So when you talk about Fed points dropping, all those things falling into place, I really do think that that's those 6 more weeks of winter fully fabricated, right? I mean, how else would you validate that bet? Would you have to look at average temperatures in Pennsylvania or year over year relative to what Pakistani Phil says? It's one of those bets that you could probably never even have 2 normal people agree on if winter really went an extra 6 weeks in whatever city or town you happen to live in. But as soon as those 6 weeks that we all know because the groundhog saw his shadow are over, that puts us square in the Fed chair switch out. That puts us square coming out of spring break right into that slide towards the summer. It's going to tee up. I mean, talk about buy in May and go away. I feel like we're going to have one of those Mays like we have never seen. And it's going to be across the boards. It could be gold bars even, because everything's peaking, ready to pop.
I think that's right. I think everything's ready to pop. I feel like the AI storyline, people are, I read something the other day about like if you poll the average American and ask them about AI, they say they're fearful. But if you actually observe their behavior, they're using AI in their everyday lives, even though they'll tell you on a survey that they're scared it's going to take their job and that it's so bad and all these worries in their day-to-day life. People are using these new tools, just like the Fed is out there saying, we're going to use AI. We're going to use it as a deflationary tool. Well, what does AI mean for an average worker? What does deflationary look like for me? It means I'm more efficient with my time and the value that I create. and how I create value and how I'm able to create value, how efficiently I can create value. I want the Fed doing that, and guess how they're going to efficiently create a whole ton of value. Trillions in value, just like Elon Musk did, buying his own company with his right hand to support his left hand. They're going to roll out stable coins like nobody's ever seen. Tether well-positioned, Ripple well-positioned. This market structure bill is going to come to fruition, and there will just continue to be an onslaught of new capital that can now flow between the digital world and the real world. All that digital gold is now going to be compatible with physical gold. It even sounds like a meme, which you may have seen that headline, gold and silver trading like meme stocks. This volatility that all of a sudden showed back up in the real world, almost like, oh, don't forget, you can manipulate this one too. You can manipulate the price of gold.
Well, it was really coinciding with the tokenization of gold. We talked about this about 2-3 shows ago, that you can take and tokenize a troy ounce of gold, and you can go buy that ETF version of that through your Fidelity advisor, and you have a ticket that says you have a troy ounce of gold. The same way you have a ticket that says I have 1 ETH or 1 Bitcoin ETF. It looks no different than anything else that's on my little quarterly printouts. But it behaves very different, because in entering new derivative markets on rare metals has actually had the effect of increasing the value of the rare metals. So now if you're someone who has a modestly myopic view of the world, and says, wait a second, I know another thing that I have this company and I want to sell it to myself. Maybe I should tokenize it first. Wait a second, I have this car that I'm trying to sell on Craigslist. Maybe I should tokenize it first. Some shared value of the car, because maybe the price of the car will go up. There's sort of these interesting causality when you create the digital twin of something and the value goes up. AI and my agent, my digital twin of me at work, boss man, has made my value go up, like you just said. So if that's true, should I start going out and just hoarding zinc and nickel and then just tokenize the crap out of it and just watch sort of semi-precious metal values go through the ceiling? Should we tokenize fancy jewelry? What if we tokenize those insane necklaces that the misguided Louvre thief stole? What if those gems were tokenized and then all of France had part ownership, and they actually stole something that could just be a replica? You don't even have to have it out. No one's going to know. It's such an interesting concept, because the digital twin could be more valuable than the actual sapphires behind the glass. It starts to make me really, again, it's the future is valuable, but the tokenized version of it's more valuable. It's starting to realize that there's now just A equals B math equation. Find something that people like in this world. Let's take it back to our Labubus and the Labubling. The idea of a Labubu, the tokenized version of it, is actually more powerful than the actual Labubu, because that little chain might break on my tennis bag and it will fall off in the street and I won't even know. This is something where I think that this year, it's the year of tokenization for real, and it's the year that the markets all figure out a way to reconcile the equatable value of all these things, because you're going to have to say, how much ETH is this much stablecoin worth? Is this much tokenized gold worth? Is this much? The converters of value are going to have to reduce to some abstract. And I really do believe, I'll say it now, that Bitcoin is going to become a de facto way that all these other things will have to be valued against. There's going to need to be some single thing. It's either fiat dollars or Bitcoin or both. But it seems like we're going to try to steer into one or both of those as a country, just to control basically every other derivative product that comes off of all these assets and these commodities.
Yeah. If you're in the market of controlling the markets, that's a good way to do it, isn't it? An asset that's not owned by anybody with a finite value to it or a finite supply. It makes sense to me. Yeah. The other thing that when you started going down, everything can be tokenized, I started to think about just real world assets. And maybe that's a good segue into a new Disney CEO and Disney doubling down on real world experiences. And I know you've talked about the internet of behaviors here on the show. And right now, that internet of behaviors is typically tracked on our digital footprint. We try to understand real humans through the lens of how they browse the digital world, how they browse on their mobile phone, how they interact with e-commerce or email or clicking an ad. Those are the proxies for their real human behavior. But the moment you get to anything that has a power source, a battery, anything that can be electrified, even with the smallest amount of electricity, can now be a data receptor, a collector, an AI node on the network that can now feed back information about real human behavior, not with the digital twin functioning as a proxy, but rather how they move about a park. What emotions do they feel when they see something? What is the most effective path that they walk when they take the path through the Magic Kingdom? I can see a world that doubling down on real world experiences to truly understand human behavior, families, social interactions. I go so far as to say love and hate, like the things that real humans actually care about. How else are you going to get that data in the real world? Well, I think Disney's in a good spot to make that magic. I don't know if we'll hear any of that kind of edge computing or Internet of Things, but Disney, from an innovation perspective, we've seen some of the robots. We've seen some of the emotional AI characters where this thing can talk to you and it can interact with you, and it may know your history, and it may know your parents' names, and it may know your aunt and your uncle's names, and it can elicit emotions in real life.
Yeah, and as you're describing the in real life aspect of the Disney announcement, to me was literally the most important one, the most important aspect, because we had talked about Netflix already awakening to this, right? We know that Netflix purchased a derelict army base in New Jersey. They bought the mall in Pennsylvania. They're creating these Tadum emails that are teasing the Tadum theater experience, meaning like literally Tadum, like at the end of a movie. And the idea that you will physically need to be in the real world in order to actually extract the value that you're describing, because we've, in some ways, have already hit our limits. And, if you think about the data that can be collected through personal devices, that data is rich and often confusing, and almost there's too many inputs, right? This is why we started the show, right? How do you find the signal among the noise? Because that's what a data set is. I mean, I work with companies all the time, and they refer to their data sets as things like lakes and blobs. They call them data lakes and blobs. One company even refers to it as a barge. You have to put data on the barge to sail across the data lake because it's so vast and massive. And how are you going to find your data? Oh, it's on the barge. Oh, good. Thank God it's not underwater or whatever. I think there's these analogies that are like suggestive of the fact that there's too much. But the LLM is kind of, that works for AI, but not really for everybody else, right? So now what's the next thing? Well, they all happen to have an accelerometer and a GPS in their pocket. Some have more than one. We know exactly how they move. When you talk about Disney and these guys and the way that they can use all the feelings, right? Their use of aromatics in the parks and in the rides is something they've been doing now for decades, right? When you go to the end of the Tiana's Bayou Adventure, or as you're walking through the line, I should say, you get to see her shop and where she cans her vegetables and all the stuff. And there's a section where there's someone who had just left the kitchen and they're baking, guess what? Beignets. And there are these gorgeous beignets just sitting there just out of reach across the little ropes and things, but you can smell them, that sweet smell of sugar and the cornmeal and whatever else is in those things. And then what happens when you get off the ride? Oh, well, you're near Tiana's, beignet shop, and you're like, wow, we should probably go have one. And there's so many of these rides.
I was just thinking about beignets.
There's all these things like that where they kind of create that effect. And so now this next effect is, like you're saying, looking at eyes. Like when you come around the corner in Snow White and there's the queen, and the queen is in the mirror, that talking about mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest? And she turns around, she's the ugly hag, and it's shocking. There are ways to watch your pupils. Are your pupils dilating? Are kids excited? Are they terrified? What's their emotional state, right? All this stuff's being collected. So they named this dude D'Amaro, the guy who's basically responsible for all parks and resorts. You're talking about now this next level in real life experience and understanding for real the Internet of behaviors, because you probably could go to Disney parks once with your family or with a friend, and they could just observe your geo path, like you said, and what you do for just a few hours and already know exactly what you'll do for the rest of your day. They already have you nailed because you drop into a profile that's so nuanced and
specific. They can roll out the prediction of what's best fit for you next. They can predict exactly what the next best thing to put in front of you is. And we learned this through the internet and predictive marketing and personalized marketing and all of it happening in this internet-powered experience at the glass. And now imagine bringing that back out to the real world. into a personalized, in real time, AI driven experience where my interaction with that mirror can be one thing and my kid's interaction with that character can be something different. It can, and Disney did it with, think about the wristbands and like that, what that really was. And
early wearable tech, basically before Apple Watches ever showed up.
yeah. And now that not only can be all those data collectors, the accelerometers, how fast you walk, but it's your wallet. It's, it knows, it gets you into the rides. But what if it also now is sort of the thing that, is this near field communication with the mountain around you and the artificial sunshine in the lines, and you're hot. It reads your temperature, so all of a sudden there's a mist that appears before you go under the water ride. Like,
you're hired. You're hired. Get him out. Get him in there. That's what we need. It's exactly what we need. The biometrics is the missing piece. Reading eyes, like you say, and you can't do that without putting your money where your mouth is, because the Walt Disney Company knows everyone else wants to beat them at their game, right? They're the top of their game. When was the last time they opened a Disney park and resort? Well, let's rewind. It was more than 10 years ago. It was Disney Shanghai in 2016. Why is it sort of interesting that this new guy, new head of Disney, former Parks and Resorts head, is right now in partnership with Abu Dhabi, a part of the United Arab Emirates, one of the two most well-known Emirates of the seven, Dubai being one of the most well-known, and then Abu Dhabi probably second. But there is a new Disney park and resort that is being built right now in Abu Dhabi. Those guys just gave $500 million to the Trump crypto project, and they're giving God knows how much money to Disney and to who had all the other projects that we don't even know about. So when we talk about all these interrelationships of the world, the global scale that is involved in producing the most local and intimate experiences with beloved characters, and nuance so that your user-generated content can be married and matched perfectly to their brand content and can create the future of their storytelling. And I think they're going to start to accelerate in real life development. If they're smart, they know Netflix has a boatload of money and they're going to start to compete with theme parks that actually will resonate. So Disney's going to put their foot on the gas and they're going to go hard right now in the UAE.
Yeah, what better way, though, to blur the physical world and the digital world, not just financially, we talk about a lot here on the show, but from an entertainment perspective, you called it Netflix doubling down on those experiences. We're still watching this Paramount Warner Brothers deal play out in real time. We covered here the intellectual property from Disney being fed into ChatGPT, Sora as an AI training. So we're not fearing the AI. In fact, in the digital world, we want to give it more of our AI. We're going to license it to you, Sora. Go forth and make more personalized content. Because by the way, those little videos that you create, of you creating funny scripts for your kids as you're goofy, when you show up in the park and it's attached to your wallet and your kid's talking to that mirror, it's going to be able to recall that conversation you had with that intellectual property in a one-to-one basis in real life. And that is how you're going to make magic, because now you've blurred physical and digital in a way that is seamless to a kid. They're not going to understand or care. The infrastructure fades into the background, and now the digital experience I had at home matches the physical one that I have in the parks. And if you are creating and literally creating experiences in real life, you can own the future. That we just got there in our thesis. I can't wait to see February, the new moon starting, that full moon starting on the first day. February is like clean 28 days. It's like a perfect 4 weeks, Sunday to Sunday. When you look at it on the calendar, it's a beautiful little pocket right there at the beginning of Q1 for all of these narratives to make their debut. I think 6 weeks of winter leads us right into what looks like a very hopeful spring. I think blockchain and AI and the continued intersection and the blurring of the physical and the digital is just it will be the 2026 narrative, no doubt.
Yeah, and and just maybe some final thoughts, but if you recognize that the future and that the predictive products surrounding the future are something that can be influenced by those in the present, then maybe so long as that you're involved, you're aligned with that future that you really want to have play out, maybe that will allow people to feel like they've been part owners of creating a better future for not just themselves, but for those around them. And if you can give that benevolent lens, slide it over, what's better, one or two? One or two? I'll say two. And then you can just kind of make those bets. Then maybe this whole notion is going to change the way that everyone thinks of their own life. Because if you can bet on your own future, like every athlete you ever hear on TV talking like, well, if I could bet, I would bet on myself, right? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest? Well, it's you. It's you, and it's your daughter. Thank you. I mean, when that all happens, I think that we've now come full circle to a place where the actual embracing of all the things that everyone is so terrified of, because as single words floating around the ether, they are scary. When you talk about de-dollarization, you talk about AI, you talk about agentic this and all that. Well, if you say, no, 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 but if you're going to have the ability to help curate and be successful in your own future, then you will happily adopt all these things. You'll happily wear an Apple Watch with apps that track everything. You'll happily become your own bank. You'll have your own stable coin. You'll happily ride on the Haunted Mansion ride. And at the end, instead of one of the three ghosts, you'll be sitting next to your beloved dead uncle. Like this is where we're going. It's your story. It's your future. It's for me, I'm very excited about this year. This is going to be a big one for all of us in tech.
I can't wait. We'll do it again next week, sir. Keep your eye on the groundhogs. Keep your eyes to the sky. And buy some bags while the price is in the trash. Be a raccoon if I were you.
This is the month of the raccoon moon, everyone. Be the raccoon. Awesome. Look forward to talking to you next week.
Peace.
Peace.